What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I am your host for today, Simon Voyanos, aka Coach V. It is November 6th, 2024, and I am bringing you our very final episode of the 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football season. This is your 5A End of the Year award show. Here on this episode, we have the honor of recognizing so many great players here in 5A. A lot of them, or at least a solid chunk of them, players who have been around for 2 or 3 years. So they are some of the very first pioneers. Even our third year, or I guess our first year players in our third year are big time as well and pioneers. And so this episode is in their honor. And we want to make sure we recognize some of the best players in the state. And even then, there's so many great players out there who just barely missed out on being a finalist. And there were some tough decisions that needed to be made. But before we hop into it, just so that you know how we operate here on the Playmakers Corner, when it comes to end of the year awards, for this one, it's just going to be myself and Gino with votes. We will vote for each category here, and those categories are best quarterback, best receiver, best utility player, which goes to the best basically running back or player that is used all around type deal there, running back, blocker, center. Then we have best rusher, best linebacker, best defensive back, newcomer of the year, which goes to the best freshman on varsity performance wise. We have defensive playmaker of the year, offensive playmaker of the year, coach of the year, and most valuable playmaker, which goes to obviously the MVP of this state. And so myself and Gino each have a vote for each of those categories, and then you, the fans, had a vote as well. You voted on our Twitter/X at Playmakers Corner, and that vote will be the tiebreaker for any of the ties that myself and Gino have. So if it's 1-1, if it is going 3 different ways, it's always going to go to the fan vote. That's how we've done things here on the podcast for both our college women's flag football awards and our boys high school football awards. So there you go there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into it. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about the best quarterback of the year. There are a lot of different candidates for this one, but we have finalized it to 4 of these great ones. Let's go ahead and start with the junior out of Valor Christian, Faith Prinzo, on the year. And this includes playoff stats as of October 26th. I believe, threw for 3,622 yards, 47 touchdowns, 13 picks, also had 895 rushing yards and 9 rushing touchdowns, a very efficient here, only 13 interceptions on the year, and then throwing with a 71.4% completion percentage, which is fantastic for this quarterback here for Valor. Now, let's go ahead and look at some of the key games that she had here, some of her best statistical and just great, performances all around. But to start, against Denver South, which ended up being a playoff team, she threw for 167 yards, 3 touchdowns, and also ran for a touchdown against them. Against Regis Jesuit, she went 16 of 24 for 148 yards and a touchdown, and then also had 11 rushing yards in a pretty close win against them. Against Lakewood and Colorado Springs Christian, she threw for 5 touchdowns each in those games. Against Chatfield in the regular season, threw for 17 of 23 for 239 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Also had a rushing touchdown and 67 yards. That was a big game there. Against TCA, that was an overtime game that she would help win. 22 of 29, 240 yards, 3 touchdowns, also 15 rushing yards added in that game, just to name a few there. So there you go there. And okay, I should probably mention this as well. Against Mountain View at the very end of the regular season, she had a great performance. 26 of 34, 314 yards, 5 touchdowns, only 2 picks, also 69 rushing yards, as she has proven time and time again how dangerous she can be when she gets going, and has had some big performances against teams that did end up making the playoffs. So there you go there, but that's Faith Prinzo out of Valor Christian. Moving on, we have another junior quarterback out of Cherry Creek. That is Addie Beck in her second year, technically, with this program. Threw for 3,781 yards, 60 touchdowns, and 9 picks. Also had 459 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. That's as of October 26th, unfortunately, falling just short to legend there in a heartbreaking one. But, she did not play in August at all, and there were like a good, I want to say like 2 or 3 weeks in August where she did not play, and she still came out and she played great, starting with a big time performance against Pomona, 31 of 36 for 382 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Against Arvada West, let's go to Arvada West, sorry, but there's another game I want to talk about after this. Against Arvada West, she threw for 22 of 28, 266 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, also had 27 rushing yards. She would end up winning Playmaker of the Week that week. Against Columbine, that's the game I wanted to talk about, 37 of 42, 302 yards and 6 touchdowns, also a rushing touchdown in that one, playing absolutely great football. Arapahoe was another playoff team. She lit up 239 yards and 5 touchdowns in that game. Against Chatfield in the playoffs, 32 of 38, 258 yards and 5 touchdowns and 1 pick. Also 32 rushing yards. Against Legend here, I feel like these stats aren't complete because I know she threw a touchdown, or I'm pretty sure she threw a touchdown, but it is not counted. But she did throw for 309 yards, did throw 2 picks, but had 51 rushing yards in that game where they only lost 40-35. But, we've known that she's been a super talented quarterback after watching her, guide this team to state last year and unfortunately losing to Arvada West. This year, they lose a tough one to Legend. And even then, this team scored 35 points in that playoff loss. So you got to give her a lot of credit for that one. Now, moving on, let's talk about the quarterback of the team that did beat Addie Becks last year, and that's Arvada West's senior quarterback, Sailor Swanson, one of the most prolific quarterbacks the state has ever seen this year, and this includes the state championship run that they went on here, or state championship appearance run that they went on. Make sure you check out episode 416 for that recap. She threw for almost 5,000 yards, 4,953 yards, 81 touchdowns, 12 picks, while also having 958 rushing yards and 12 rushing touchdowns. She has been prolific throughout her career, and this season was no different. Looking at some of her key games to start the season, first off, 17 of 31, 197 yards, 5 touchdowns, also 44 rushing yards in that game. Against Valor Christian, she would throw for 29 of 38, 211 yards, 3 touchdowns, also had 88 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in that one. Against Ralston Valley, 287 yards, 4 touchdowns, only 18 rushing yards in that one. That was Ralston Valley, I believe, the first time. They would play them a second time, where she would throw for 317 yards and 5 touchdowns, only 6 incompletions in that one. Also had 2 rushing touchdowns in that game. Looking at the playoffs here and some of the teams that she was able to take down against Grandview, 18 of 28, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Did throw 2 picks, but also ran for 125 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns on only 9 carries. Against Valor Christian in the playoffs this time, 32 of 39, 361 yards, 6 touchdowns, also had a rushing touchdown. And then against Mountain Vista, kind of a tougher performance, but still put up some solid stats, 31 of 47, 292 yards, 3 touchdowns to 4 picks, but did have 64 rushing yards, and I felt like played well enough to bring them back after being down a score, or either a score or 2 scores, I can't remember right now, but bring them back and tying that game, and then giving them the lead in the 4th quarter. That was absolutely big time for her. But Sailor Swanson has been great throughout her entire career. It is no surprise that she's a finalist for best quarterback here in 2024. But then, last but not least here, we have one more junior quarterback, so 3 junior quarterbacks, and then we also have Sailor Swanson here. But this junior quarterback might be the best one out of all of them, and that is Ariana Akey, the quarterback for Mountain Vista, including this state championship run. First off, undefeated, did not lose a game this season, but threw for 4,435 yards, 82 touchdowns to 9 picks. Also had 1,243 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns here. Like I said, big time performance this season in what I believe is her first season of flag football here, and she played great. Honestly, she played great. Just looking at the stats here against Arvada West, the very first game where she came onto the scene and made it known that she's here. 23 of 31, 197 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, 121 rushing yards to go with that in that upset win at the time. That was against Cherry Creek, 19 of 29, 130 yards, 3 touchdowns to 2 picks, but also had 60 rushing yards. Against Legend, that was a signature game for her where she threw the game-winning Hail Mary touchdown pass, 232 yards, 5 touchdowns in that one. Also 127 rushing yards in that game. Fast forwarding to the playoffs and talking about some of her big performances there against Regis Jesu at 19 of 25, 258 yards, 6 touchdowns in that game. And she also had 45 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Against Thunder Ridge, 22 of 30, 232 yards, 5 touchdowns. Also 109 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. An 8-touchdown game in the playoff is insane. Against Legend in the semifinals, 339 yards, 4 touchdowns to 1 pick. Also 53 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Against Arvada West, 331 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, and 81 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns in that game. Ariana Akey has made it known that she is here, at least for these next 2 years, and can potentially be the face of Colorado. But let's go ahead and get into the votes here, starting with the Twitter vote. A lot of votes on this one, 420 votes, so shout out all the people who voted on this one. But the winner of the fan vote here is Valor Christian's junior quarterback Faith Prinzo, who won 60% of the vote, which is a whole ton. Shout out Valor Christian's community for coming out and voting in this one. Then you have Addie Beck right behind her with 19%, Sailor Swanson with 11%, and Ariana Akey with 10% there. So there you go, 1 vote for Faith Prinzo. Gino will go ahead and cast his vote for the junior out of Mountain Vista, Ariana Akey. He says this: Akey's rise this season as the top quarterback in the state has been so cool to watch. She's too quick to get sacked, and her arm is elite on top of that. And then nothing more to be said there. Now my vote, and this vote would be the winning vote. I will be voting for the junior out of Mountain Vista, Ariana Akey here. Look, I love Sailor Swanson's game. I think she is a pioneer of the sport. She's going to be a legend. She is definitely one of the founding mothers of this game here in the state of Colorado. But Ariana Akey made it known that she is here to play and that she's the best quarterback in the state by not only doing it through the air, but also running the ball as well. Just a couple hundred more yards than Sailor Swanson. And then on top of that, they were undefeated this season and they won state, and that definitely swayed my opinion just a little bit. But in general, I think, they were undefeated in the regular season as well. If you wanted to make it a regular season award thing, I can too. She was great during the regular season, and there were times where it looked a little rough and maybe they would lose, but she came through each time. Against Legend, she threw that Hail Mary touchdown pass to give them the win. Against Chaparral, that's a game that I was able to attend to live. They went down like 2 scores at half or something crazy like that, and she would lead them back. Not only would the defense shut them out, but Mountain Vista's offense would explode for 4 or 5 touchdowns in that game. And that's honestly the game that really sold me on Ariana Akey as the best quarterback here. So there you go there. Your 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football 5A best quarterback is the junior from Mountain Vista, Ariana Akey. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about best wide receiver here. I will say this: we have 2 players from the same school, so we'll start with one of them here for our finalists. And let's go ahead and start with Molly Shellpepper out of Arvada West, one of the receivers that made it as a finalist. She had an excellent season here, including the playoffs. She caught 115 passes for 1,632 receiving yards and 26 receiving touchdowns. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, she is only second in the state in both receiving yards and touchdowns to one other player. So we will talk about that later here. But let's go ahead and talk about some of her key games here against Chatfield in the regular season. She caught 8 receptions for 125 yards and 3 touchdowns. Against Columbine, 83 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ralston Valley, 67 yards and 3 touchdowns. Against Valor Christian, I think the second time that is, this was her better game. 7 receptions, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. In her first game, still had a touchdown on 3 receptions there, which was big time there. But she has been big time all season as a player for Arvada West, who has been able to move the sticks for them. In my opinion, I think she is a college level player, and we are hoping to get to cover her in college as well for flag football. But these last 2 or 3 years has been great, as she has been a key part of this Arvada West passing attack. Now, moving away from Arvada West for now, let's go ahead and talk about another senior from Cherry Creek High School. That is Molly Durigi here, who had a great season as their top receiver over there. 98 receptions, 960 receiving yards, and 19 receiving touchdowns as one of the top receivers in the entire state. And what also makes this pretty impressive is that she is also great on the defensive side of the ball. So she's playing both ways here, but still excelling at receiver. And so let's talk about her key games against Chatfield in the regular season. I was able to watch this masterclass. 4 receptions, 58 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Against Columbine, 12 receptions. That's the most she caught all season. 101 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. Against Arvada West, in a game they won 6 for 65 and a touchdown. Against Mullen, 7 for 50 and 2 touchdowns. Grandview, 5 for 61 and 2 touchdowns. Chatfield again, this time in the playoffs, 6 for 28 and a touchdown. And then against a legend in her final game for Cherry Creek, still put up great numbers despite the loss. 11 receptions, 93 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Molly Durigi has been a borderline MVP candidate, which, we may or may not talk about later here. And for good reason here, as this offense, a lot of it runs through her. Not all of it, but a lot of the offense runs through her and her abilities to make tough catches, physical catches, move the sticks, and catch touchdowns, and she has done just that for Cherry Creek these last 2 years. Now, moving on, or at least last 2 years at least, she might have done it for 3, but just wanted to mention that. Now, moving on, we have another senior, and it is Alexis Wood from Valor Christian. On the season, she also had some carries here, 27 carries for 321 yards and a receiving touchdown. And then as a wide receiver, she was one of their top receiving options for them. 78 receptions, 1,133 receiving yards, and 14 receiving touchdowns. Some of her big games this season here came against Regis Jesuit, where she had 7 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown in that game. Against Chatfield in the regular season, 9 receptions, 155 yards, and a receiving touchdown in that one. Against Mountain View, 4 receptions, 71 yards, and a touchdown in that one. Against Chaparral in their playoff win, 6 receptions, 153 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Some of her better, rushing performances while still playing, receiver was against Mountain View as well. So in addition to the 71 yards and a touchdown, she also had 4 carries for 87 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in that game. Against Dakota Ridge, she had 59 rushing yards, and Columbine, she had 51 rushing yards. She's a do-it-all receiver. I do think she's also another player that could play on the college level, a taller, athletic receiver. That was a huge part of this Valor Christian football team these last 2 seasons. And then, last but not least, we have the senior out of Arvada West, Sarah Walker here. In her 3rd season, she got 142 receptions for 1,632 yards and a whopping 31 receiving touchdowns on this year. Some of her big games were against Ralston Valley, which we were able to see. 10 receptions, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns. Against Chatfield, 5 receptions, 66 yards, and 2 touchdowns in that one. Against Pomona, 6 receptions, 97 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Against Mullen, 9 receptions, 146 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Against, I believe this is Douglas County in the playoffs, 8 receptions, 99 yards, 3 touchdowns. Against Valor, she had 8 for 75 and a touchdown. And then in the state championship, despite a loss, she put on a masterclass performance. 12 receptions, 120 yards, and 3 touchdowns, as she did will them back into that game and into the lead, but unfortunately that Arvada West team would come short. Regardless, Sarah Walker has dominated the state for years now, so it should be no surprise that she is on our list, our finalist list for best wide receiver in 5A in 2024. But let's go ahead and get to the voting here, starting with the Twitter vote. 251 votes here, and 47% of them would go to this senior wide receiver out of Valor Christian, Alexis Wood. Like I said, 47% of the vote. In second was Molly Durigi with 27%. In third was Sarah Walker with 18%, and Molly Shellpepper with 8% there. So there you go, Alexis Wood of Valor Christian winning the fan vote. Gino will go ahead and vote for Sarah Walker out of Arvada West. He said this one's a no-brainer. The reigning state champion is the most reliable, experienced, and skilled receiver in the state. Standing at 6 feet tall, she leads in basically all statistics for receivers as well. Reigning state champ as of last year, that is, I think is what he meant. And yeah, I'm going to have to also go with the senior out of Arvada West, Sarah Walker. She has been dominant. There have been games where she has just taken over and just has been unguardable. And the best way to stop her is to pretty much try to outscore Arvada West here and, you know, keep daring her to make plays. And she does. So there you go there. Your 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football 5A best wide receiver is the senior from Arvada West, Sarah Walker. All right, now let's go ahead and move to best utility player. This goes to the players who play center, running back, or a little bit of everything here. So some may say gadget players, or these are just great all-around players. You decide. Let's go ahead and talk about it, starting with the juniors. We have 3 juniors nominated for this award here, starting with the junior from Mountain Vista, Braylon Looney. On the season, by the way, she plays both ways, defense as well, but on the season, playing center for them mostly, 107 receptions, 1,008 yards, 19 receiving touchdowns here through the playoffs, and on the way to a state championship. Let's talk about some of her big games here, starting with Rock Canyon, or starting with this Rock Canyon stretch, because from Rock Canyon to Heritage, there's like a 3-game stretch where she goes absolutely crazy. But Rock Canyon, 7 receptions for 69 yards, 2 touchdowns. Regis Jesuit, 17 receptions, which is a season high for her, 141 yards, 2 touchdowns. Heritage, 11 receptions, 115 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. And then against Chaparral in that close game, 9 receptions, which was the third highest in the season for her, 54 yards and a touchdown in that comeback win for them. Now moving on outside of that stretch, down the line against Ralston Valley, 6 for 92 and a touchdown in that one. In the playoffs against Regis again, 3 for 39. Thunder Ridge, 2 for 21 and a touchdown. Against Legend, 2 for 3 yards, but a touchdown caught in that one. And then against Arvada West, she was key in that game, 6 receptions for 48 yards as she helped ice that game. She has been big time for this team. We've got to watch her throughout the summer league and this season, as well as last season as well. So we've been watching her play football for 2 years now, and this year she had a big time year for Mountain Vista and was a huge reason why they were able to go to state. So there you go there, the junior out of Mountain Vista. And now let's move on. Let's talk about another junior player, this time out of Ralston Valley, and Ashlyn Callahan, listed at running back, wide receiver, and safety. She did it all for them. 38 carries for 331 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also 55 receptions for 727 yards and 8 touchdowns. And this was with 2 different quarterbacks, so definitely impressive there. Now let's talk about her key games against Northfield. She had only 2 carries for 73 yards, but had 3 receptions for 60 yards and a touchdown. Against Arvada West, she was a very productive, 3 rushes for 22 yards and 5 for 68 yards. 5 receptions for 68 receiving yards, that is. in that regular season game against them. Against the Valor Christian, she was productive, 4 carries for 20 rushing yards, 7 receptions for 85 yards. Against the Lakewood, she had 4 for 96 and 2 touchdowns. Now moving down the line later on in the season against Arvada, she had a pretty good game against them. 9 receptions, 125 yards and a touchdown. Against Green Mountain, had 5 for 77 and a touchdown in that game. And then in their last game, or at least one of their last games against Mountain Vista, she had 7 carries for 75 yards and a touchdown and 7 receptions for 64 receiving yards. That's absolutely big time, as she was huge for this Ralston Valley team. And by the way, these stats don't even include the playoffs, I don't think. So there you go there. That is just how productive she has been for Ralston Valley. Now, we have one last junior I want to talk about here, and it's the one from Chaparral, Sophia O'Donnell. She was kind of the mainstay for this team all season long, the main focus, the one that really got things going for them when they needed them. But on the year, 163 carries, so they really fed her the ball. 1,642 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. Also 34 receiving yards and 457 receiving 34 receptions for 457 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. She has been big time for the Chaparral team. And running the ball in flag football is hard, right? Against good teams, that's just not going to work. But you have some special players who do make it work, like a Sophia O'Donnell. Some of her big games came against playoff teams, including a game against Grandview where she ran for 102 yards, caught 39 yards and a touchdown. Against Arapahoe, only 8 carries for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also caught 2 receptions for 33 yards in that game. Against Heritage, I gotta see her pop off in that one. 13 carries, 118 yards and 2 touchdowns in that one. I don't believe she caught anything there. So that's definitely big time. Against Chatfield, 74 rushing yards and a touchdown. Against Ponderosa, 126 yards. She also had 126 yards against Thunder Ridge, but didn't score a touchdown against Thunder Ridge, a rushing touchdown, that is. She did have 3 receptions for 56 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown in that one. And then in that Ponderosa game, she had 2 rushing touchdowns to go with those 126 yards. So either way, just super productive. Like I said, it's really hard to run the ball against good teams, against playoff teams, but she was able to do that. And, she popped off and had some great runs where she would just rip it off for a huge gain, and then that would really open up this offense here. So there you go, Sophia O'Donnell out of Chaparral, their explosive athlete. No surprise here that she is a finalist for this. Now, our last finalist is a senior from Cherry Creek, Sophia Ball. On the season, she has been one of their centers / blockers for Cherry Creek here, and she was one of their lead receivers. 95 receptions, 899 yards and 12 receiving touchdowns. This includes dominating performances against Mountain Vista, 15 for 115 yards. Against Arapahoe, 9 for 80 and 2 touchdowns. Grandview, 7 for 53 and 2 touchdowns. Chatfield, well, in both games she played well, but in the first one, 5 for 65 and a touchdown, and then in the second one, 7 for 68 and a touchdown. She has been the security blanket for this team and has made some excellent catches as one of their best possession receivers over there, and is a big reason why that offense is so dangerous. But let's go ahead and get to the vote here. Gino is going to go ahead and vote for Sophia O'Donnell, the junior from Chaparral. He said Chaparral's super efficient offense basically runs through O'Donnell. She's the go-to target on short yardage situations, and she always seems to execute. She leads the state in rush yards by a pretty wide margin, so I got to go O'Donnell here. The Twitter vote, by the way, with 213 votes, will also go to Sophia O'Donnell, so she wins the fan vote by 45%. Sophia Ball with 22%, Ashlyn Callahan with 18%, and Braylon Looney with 15% there. So there you go. She's pretty much already going to win this award, but I'm also going to go ahead and vote for Sophia O'Donnell out of Chaparral. In my opinion, it's really hard to run the ball in flag football against good teams, and she was able to do that on a consistent basis while also catch the ball and just be really dangerous whenever the ball was in her hands in general. And so for that reason, your 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football 5A best utility player has to go to the junior from Chaparral, Sophia O'Donnell. All right, now let's go ahead and talk about best rusher here. A lot of great rushers here to talk about. I believe, if I am not mistaken, we have a freshman, 2 sophomores, and a senior finalist to talk about for this segment here. So let's go ahead and hop into it, starting with Regis Jesuits freshman rusher Jasmine Lugo. On the season, 86 tackles, and 37 sacks on the season. I believe she has some of the most sacks against playoff teams out of anybody in the state. Just looking at the game she had against Heritage, she had 3 sacks. Valor Christian, she had 1. Thunder Ridge, she had 1. Chatfield, she had 2. Against, I believe this is Douglas County right here, which they only lost by 2 in that one. She had 3. Against Mountain Vista, the defending state champs now, she had 6. Against Mullen, she had 5. Legend 3. Pondo 6. Horizon 5. She has been on an absolute tear. I believe all the teams I just listed there, all the teams I just listed there were playoff teams. So absolutely big time, as she is only a freshman here, but was a big part of that defense because of how aggressive she was at getting to the quarterback and stopping and stalling those drives. So there you go there, Jasmine Lugo out of Regis Jesuit. Now, we're going to talk about another underclassman, but she's a sophomore out of North Glennon. That is Madeline Olmos here on the season. 59 tackles and 36 sacks. In every single game that she got a sack in, she got multiple. So there was never a game where she got only 1 sack. And I feel like that says a lot there. But some of her big games, a 5-sack performance against Thornton to start the season, 4-sack performance against Aurora West College Prep Academy. She also got 3 sacks against Mountain View, 7 against Horizon, which I believe was a playoff team, another playoff team as well, and then 2 against Northfield there. So super productive for them. Also 10 tackles against Horizon too. She had herself a day against that squad. But the sophomore Madeline almost just getting started for this North Glen team and already making a big impact here in year 2. Now, moving on, we have another sophomore that I want to talk about here from Chaparral. It is Molly McWilliams. She had 61 tackles and 32 sacks on the season. That does include some big sack performances against Arapahoe, where she had 4, Rock Canyon, where she had 5, Chatfield, where she had 6, Highlands Ranch, she had 4, and then against North Glen, she had 4, and then in the playoffs even, against Valor Christian, she had 2 sacks in that game. She's just getting started here. She's going to be a great player for them for the next 2 years, and was a big reason why the Chaparral team got on to such a hot start really this season. I mean, they lost, I think their first regular season loss came on October 7th against Mountain Vista in that game where she had a sack, and I was able to watch that game and I thought she had a good one there, but unfortunately coming short in that one. But up until then, they were on a crazy 10-game winning streak where they were dominant, and she was a big part of all that. Now, last but not least, we have a senior rusher here, one of our finalists from Valor Christian High School. It is Margot Harry on the season, 75 tackles, 38 sacks, 30 hurries as well. This includes some big performances against Ralston Valley, where she had 3. TCA in that overtime game, she had 4, as well as 5 hurries in that game. Against Columbine, she had 6. Chatfield, she had 5. Against Mountain View, she had 5. Ralston Valley in the playoffs, she had 5, and then Chaparral, she had 2. She has been extremely dominant against playoff type opponents and was arguably the focal point of this defense here that played well and, forced a lot of turnovers because of how dominant and chaotic she was up front for them. So there you go there. Those are all of your finalists for best rusher, but let's get to the votes, starting with mine just to mix some things up here. I'm going to go ahead and go with the freshman out of Regis Jesuit. She had the most sacks against playoff opponents, both 5A and 4A playoff opponents out of anyone else here on this list, and I think quality of opponent does matter when it comes to that stuff because, when you face good quarterbacks, they're going to get the ball out, or when you face good teams, they're going to be able to block you and scheme around you, but Lugo was able to be productive no no matter what. And I think that says a lot about how good she is here. And she's just a freshman, so she's definitely somebody looking to be here for the next couple years. So I'm casting my vote for Jasmine Lugo. Now let's go ahead and talk about the fan vote here. This was the poll with the second most amount of people voting on, with 465, and the winner of this one with 55%, so a good chunk of these, is Valor Christian's Margot Harry. Right behind her is Molly McWilliams with 20%, Madeline Almost with 18%, and Jasmine Lugo with 7%. So there you go there. Split at 1-1 for Jasmine Lugo and 1 vote for Margot Harry. Now, Gino's vote will be the deciding one here, as he was going back and forth between Margot Harry and Jasmine Lugo, but there could only be one, and he will be going with Jasmine Lugo. He said Lugo has been the catalyst for Regis's defense this year. She always seems to make a big play late in the game, and that kind of clutch ability is extremely valuable. She's also tied for the lead in the entire state in sacks, or at least last we checked, she was. That definitely could have changed as more teams put in stats, but regardless, she has gotten the most sacks against the most playoff teams in this state, and that cannot go unnoticed. So there you go there, your 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football Best Rusher in 5A goes to the freshman out of Regis Jesuit, Jasmine Lugo. Alright, now let's move on to Best Linebacker here. Some great players here that we get to talk about. Let's start with the junior from Valor Christian, Reese Beezer. She had an excellent season, statistically the best one out of all the linebackers in 5A, I would say, but she had 112 tackles and 11 interceptions, as well as 40 pass deflections. Some of her big tackle games here: against TCA she had 10, Columbine 11, Chatfield 10, Arvada West she had 10, and that was the second matchup against A West where she had 10. She also had 7 in the first one though, so shout out to that. Against Chaparral she had 14 in that one. Now, as far as interceptions go, she had 2 against TCA. That was absolutely big time. Earlier on in the season, she had 1 against South and Douglas County and Chatfield. She also had 1 against Columbine, and then the second time she got 1 against Chatfield. So 2 games against them where she got 1. And then pass deflection wise, I mean, she had herself a game against Chatfield the first time around, 6 pass deflections, which is absolutely crazy coming from a linebacker, but only a junior, so due for more coming up here in her senior year, but already one of the best players in the entire state. Now, she's our only finalist, as the rest are seniors, starting with Sophie Matthews from Chaparral here. 72 tackles, 4 sacks, and 10 interceptions to 7 pass deflections here. Some of her big tackle games came against Arapahoe with 7, Rock Canyon with 6, Mountain Vista, she had 8 in that one. In their playoff game against Valor, she had 6 in that one. So there you go there. As far as interceptions goes, against Mountain Vista, she got 2 picks in that game, which is very rare. It's rare to see Ariana Akey make that many mistakes here, but Sophie Matthews was a big reason why she struggled early on in that game. So there you go there. Another great player out of Chaparral and a player to look out for here. Now moving on, we have a senior out of Legend in Jocelyn Huntsman. She had 64 tackles, 2 sacks, and 10 pass deflections on the season. Some of her big tackles, big tackle games, I would say, big flag pulling games, if you want to be technical about it. Against Eagle Crest, she had 7. Against Heritage, 6. Chaparral, she had 7 in that big time win against them right at the end of the regular season. Against Cherry Creek, she had 10 in that game in the playoffs there. And so she's been big time. Did miss some time too, but was able to come back and, you know, played very well, in my opinion, for Legend, and was a big reason why this Legend defense was so elite out there. Then last but not least here, we have Melanie Archuleta here, aka Ducky, out of Chatfield. She had 73 tackles, 6 interceptions, and 1 pass deflection here. Against Eagle Crest, she had 10. Against Green Mountain, she had 5. Columbine, she had 7. Arapahoe, she had 8. 8 against Arapahoe, Ralston Valley, and Chaparral, so super productive in those games. Against Creek, she had a pick, Green Mountain had a pick, Arapahoe had a pick, and then Green Mountain the second time she had a pick, and those are only the stats as of October 14th here, but she was definitely big time for them throughout this season as one of the best prospects in the entire state, with the most offers, I believe, out of everyone in the entire state for college. So there you go, they're a star-studded finalist group for best linebacker, but there could only be one. Let's go ahead and go to the Twitter vote with 493 votes. This was actually the most voted on poll here. Reese Beezer won 48% of those votes. So there you go. There, she is your fan vote winner. Sophie Matthews right behind her with 20%. Jocelyn Huntsman with 18%. And Ducky Archuleta with 14% there. Now, Gino is going to go ahead and cast his vote to split this thing up and vote for Chatfield senior Ducky Archuleta. He says, I don't think there's a single linebacker in the state that has the skills and instincts that Ducky possesses. There's no way Chatfield would have been relevant this season without Ducky ball hawking as a middle linebacker. I am also going to go ahead and vote for Ducky Archuleta here. I just think that, she has been one of the best defensive players in the entire state. And this Chatfield defense at times has been kind of tough as well. And I like her ball hawking skills. I think she's a great flag puller, has great instincts. And just straight up, even though maybe not the best statistically speaking, I don't think stats always tells the whole story here. And she's definitely a catalyst for their defense over there, in my opinion. While I do think some of these other players have definitely benefited from better rushers up front, or at least a better group of rotational rushers up front, which does matter as far as keeping players fresh and getting pressure on the quarterback, which does end up helping out linebackers with more turnovers and whatnot. So there you go there. We are going to go ahead and vote for Ducky Archuleta. So she is your 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football 5A Best Linebacker. All right, now let's go ahead and move over to best defensive back. This goes to the best corners or safeties, or a little bit of both, in the entire state here. And we got a pretty diverse group of finalists, starting with the sophomore out of Grandview, Brooke Sullivan. On the season, 53 tackles, 18 interceptions, and 19 pass deflections, I believe. Out of everyone in this finalist group, she has the most amount of interceptions here with 18. Some of her big games includes her getting 2 picks against Legacy, 2 against Legend, 3 against Mullen, which is kind of crazy there. 1 against Ralston Valley, 2 against Smoky Hill, 1 against Cherry Creek, and 2 against Arvada West here. One of the bright spots for this Grandview team. She has 2 more years with this squad here, and is already super productive in year 1. Also had 19 pass deflections on the season. I don't know if I mentioned that. So just an all-around playmaker for them on the back end. Now, moving on, we got a junior finalist here in Ashlyn Callahan from Ralston Valley. On the season on defense, 49 tackles, 14 interceptions, 24 pass deflections. This does include big-time performances against Cherry Creek, where she had 3 interceptions and 1 pass deflection. I was able to be there for that game. Valor Christian, she had a pick in that one. Against Green Mountain, she had 3 picks in that game. And then, like I said, 24 pass deflections. She had 5 against Lakewood, 4 against Horizon, and then I believe Cherokee Trail as well. She's absolutely electric, and these are just the stats from the regular season, I believe, as there are more playoff stats here. But in the regular season, she was excellent and played great football for Ralston Valley. Ralston's lucky to have her for 1 more year here, as she's going to be able to carry for them in that back end at safety. Now, speaking of Ralston Valley, we have another player from there in Carmen Johnson, the Honey Badger, the senior from Ralston Valley. On the season, 42 tackles, 6 interceptions, and 32 pass deflections here. The great DBs are always the ones where, they start throwing away from them and whatnot, but Carmen Johnson still find a way to go ahead and get in there and get a bunch of pass deflections as one of the best two-way athletes in the entire state as well. But on the season, some of her best performances included a 12 tackle, 12 flagpole performance against Chatfield. She also had 4 pass deflections in that game. Against Cherry Creek, going back in time a little bit here, she had an interception and 2 pass deflections against them. Against Green Mountain, 2 picks and 7 pass deflections against them. Evergreen, 2 interceptions and 2 pass deflections against them. She has been big time all season long, getting it done on both sides of the ball, but we chose to recognize her on the defensive side of the ball. Now, moving on, let's go ahead and go to our lone senior finalist and our last one here, last but not least, in Molly Durigi from Cherry Creek High School. On the season, 54 tackles, 15 picks, 7 pass deflection. This includes big performances against Mountain Vista, where she had an interception and 4 tackles in that game. Ralston Valley, she had 2 interceptions and 5 tackles in that game. Also picks against Columbine, 2 against Arapahoe, 3 against Mullen, 1 against Grandview, 1 against Chatfield. Super productive for them. Like I said, one of the best two-way players in the entire state when I was talking about her in the best wide receiver conversation. But as a cornerback, she is one of the best here, as she has proven time and time again that it is a mistake to target her, or at least target her receiver when she is playing them one-on-one. So there you go there. Those are your finalists, but there can only be one. Gino is going to go ahead and cast his vote for Molly Durigi here. He said Cherry Creek was one of the top defenses in the state, and that is in big part to Molly Durigi's work in the secondary. She's a college level talent for sure. So there you go there. That is one vote for Molly Durigi. For me, my vote was between more so these 2 players. They play for the same team, which is wild, in Carmen Johnson and Ashlyn Callahan here. Johnson with the pass deflections advantage and Callahan with the picks advantage. But I think I'm going to go ahead and cast my vote for Ashlyn Callahan, the junior out of Ralston Valley. The interceptions, those are turnovers. That obviously speaks to me just a little bit more there. And having watched her live, she is so dangerous at the back end for Ralston Valley. So few teams are going to test them deep or have tested them deep, and it's because she's locking it down on the back end. And by the way, still had 24 pass deflections, which is great. Not as much as Carmen Johnson, but still pretty big time there. So even when she's not picking it off, it's still incomplete. She just has so much speed, great IQ, and out of all the DBs here, I believe I've seen all of them live except for Brooke Sullivan. I've just seen film, but I really like Ashlyn Callahan, so that's why I'm going to go ahead and give her my vote for best DB of the year. Now, our Twitter vote / X vote, I guess. 235 votes here. The winner of the fan vote will go ahead and be the winner of the best DB of the year, because that is our tiebreaker. And so, like I said, 235 votes, and with 44% of those votes here, Brooke Sullivan from Grandview got that, and she will be your best DB here in the 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football season in 5A. Right behind her was Carmen Johnson with 23%, Molly Durigi with 21%, and Ashlyn Callahan with 12% there. But, I think it's very deserving. Brooke Sullivan for Grandview has done a lot for them as a young player, only a sophomore, so the future is extremely bright for her, as she was super productive for that team and kept them in a lot of games. So there you go there. Your 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football 5A Best Defensive Back Award goes to Grandview sophomore Brooke Sullivan. All right, now let's go ahead and get to our Newcomer of the Year award. This goes to the best freshman on varsity from this season, and there were a lot of great freshmen that, performed and even had to leave out of this one. I think one that I got to shout out real quick before we get into finalists is Harper Tillman of Arvada West, a standout linebacker for them who honestly had an excellent season, was a big part of why that defense was so good and, why they did so well down the stretch there and were able to compete for a state championship. So wanted to shout her out because she was pretty much the last one left off of this finalist list here. But super excited for her future. We believe she's a potential college player, and there's a lot of big things ahead of her. But let's go ahead and get into our finalists for this one, starting with Jasmine Lugo out of Regis Jesuit. I already talked about her earlier on in this episode, but on offense, she did contribute just a little bit as well. Had 17 carries for 112 yards, 4 receptions for 40 yards, and then obviously defensively, that was where she excelled for the most part as a freshman, with 86 total tackles, 37 sacks, 2 pass deflections. She had the most sacks, and this is out of any rusher, I think, out of any rusher in 5A against playoff teams. And for a freshman to do that, that is absolutely big time. Against Mountain Vista, notably, she had 6 sacks, which, if anybody has watched Ariana Akey play football, that is extremely difficult to do. So shout out Jasmine Lugo out of Regis Jesuit. Another finalist I wanted to talk about was Shelby Colosimo of Ralston Valley. She had a great year on both sides of the ball. Rushing wise, 175 rushing yards and a touchdown. Receiving wise, 43 receptions for 549 yards and 11 touchdowns. Really coming on later in the year there, but there was a little stretch where she scored a touchdown in a bunch of games in a row, starting with Lakewood, 2 for 37 and a touchdown. Chatfield, 7 for 76 and 2 touchdowns. Columbine, 4 and 76 and 2 touchdowns. Legacy, 5 and 73 and a touchdown. Against Grandview, she caught a touchdown. Against Arvada West, she caught 2 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown, and then against Green Mountain, 3 receptions for 23 yards and a touchdown there. But she is also big time on defense, as she had 38 tackles, and as one of the rotational rushers who took on a bigger role as the season went on, she got 18 sacks and 43 hurries. This does include multiple sack games, where she got 2 sacks against Lakewood, Chatfield, Columbine, Grandview, and Evergreen, as well as Horizon, just to name a few here. A player that was really utilized all over, and she excelled wherever they put her. And so her future is super bright for Ralston Valley, a team that has had a pretty good reputation at developing skill players on both sides of the ball. Now, another player we wanted to talk about was Lakewood's very own Caroline Bain. She kind of did it all for this Lakewood team that really struggled this season, but she was one of their lone bright spots on the year. In the passing attempt, she threw for 692 yards and a touchdown. Also had 176 rushing yards, but had 74 receptions for 1,008 yards and unfortunately only 2 touchdowns. Some big performances that she had against Arvada West: 7 receptions for 102 yards. That's a good defense right there. Against Bear Creek, 10 receptions for 153 yards. Littleton, 10 receptions for 160 yards and a touchdown there. Defensively, she was big time too. 47 tackles, 13 picks, and 10 pass deflections. She got an interception against Dakota Ridge, Chaparral, Arvada, Littleton, Chatfield, Ralston Valley, Valor Christian, just to name a few. And then 2 interceptions against Columbine, Green Mountain, and Littleton. So super productive. Just very unfortunate that this team only won 1 game this season. But with a player like Caroline Bain, you got to feel hopeful that they'll at least figure something out with a player that talented putting up those numbers. And then last but not least, we have the quarterback out of Chaparral, Zoe Fink here. One of the few freshman starting quarterbacks in the state. But she played well in her first year on varsity and in her first year in high school. 3,072 passing yards, 50 touchdowns to 15 interceptions. Also had 461 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. As unfortunately, they only fell in the quarters, but their future is super bright because of the potential of this player, who has been playing, by the way, in that summer league we've been talking about for the last 2 years before high school. So she's had a lot of experience, and it shows, as she was a great player for them throughout this season, as they did go on a pretty massive winning streak here. But in her first year, here are some of her big games. Against Lakewood, 310 yards and 6 touchdowns there. Against Grandview, a playoff team, 143 yards and 3 passing touchdowns there, and 64 rushing yards. Against Arapahoe, another playoff team, 178 yards, 3 touchdowns to 2 picks though. Against Rock Canyon, she threw for 225 and 4 touchdowns. Against Regis, 2 touchdowns thrown in that one. Against Heritage, which I saw live, 126 yards and 2 touchdowns, plus 46 rushing yards. Against Chatfield, 207 yards, 3 touchdowns. Against Mountain Vista, she had a pretty solid game against them. 24 of 30, 220 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also 43 rushing yards. That's a game that I felt like really sold it for me, as that was a very good team. And, because of how well she played, they were able to go up early. But, a lot of other things happened that caused them to go cold. Make sure you check out that episode if you really wanted to find out why there. But there you go there. That is Zoe Fink of Chaparral, one of the best young quarterbacks in the entire state. But we can only pick one newcomer of the year, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start with Gino's vote. He's going to vote for Zoe Fink out of Chaparral. He said there was a very strong freshman class this year, but Zoe Fink shined above them all as the leader of Chaparral's offense. She's extremely poised, and it's scary to think that she has a ton of room to grow. Now, going to the Twitter poll here with 203 of the votes for this one. The winner of this fan vote got 47% of those, and that's Chaparral's Zoe Fink with that. Right behind her was Caroline Bain, then Shelby Colosimo, and then Jasmine Lugo, but Zoe Fink winning that one by a wide margin. And then I'll go ahead and vote for Zoe Fink to complete the sweep here. Like I said, I was pretty much sold on her after watching her play in that Mountain Vista game. She played well, but obviously we've seen her in the Summer League before, so this is really not that surprising, but the amount of great games she was able, or at least solid games, she was able to put together in a row that allowed Chaparral to win so much. I mean, I think they won something like 12 or something crazy like that in a row to start the season. That's absolutely big time, and so I feel like it's pretty undisputed that Zoe Fink out of Chaparral deserves Newcomer of the Year here in the 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football season in 5A. All right, now moving on to Defensive Playmaker of the Year. This award goes to the best defensive player here in 5A. And all the players that we are going to talk about as finalists were players that were finalists or potentially winners in their position award categories. So let's go ahead and talk about them, starting with Jasmine Lugo, the star rusher out of Regis Jesuit. Like I said, freshman, big thing with her, most sacks against playoff teams, both in 5A and 4A, with 37 sacks here, 36 sacks technically there. So there you go. She's been super productive for them just as a freshman too, so future is super bright. Now moving on to another underclassman, we have the sophomore from Chaparral and Molly McWilliams. This rusher was big time for them as well. 61 tackles, 32 sacks, 2 picks as well, including a big time 6-sack game against Chatfield, which really locked her in for this one. The Chaparral defense has been very good, and she's one of the catalysts for that, so we believe she's a very deserving of this award and being considered for it as a finalist. Then, moving on here, we're going to go with the junior. So, by the way, I think we're going to have a finalist from the freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior class. But anyways, we're going to go with the junior from Ralston Valley, Ashlyn Callahan. She had a great year for them at safety. 49 tackles, 14 picks, 24 pass deflections. This does include games where she got 3 interceptions against Cherry Creek and 3 against Green Mountain. She is electric for this team, and those are only stats from the regular season too. In the playoffs, she did her thing as well and is just a dangerous DB to throw the ball her way. So there you go there. That's Ashlyn Callahan, who very well deservingly so is a Defensive Playmaker of the Year finalist. And then last but not least, we have the senior from Valor Christian, and that is Margot Harry, their star rusher. 75 tackles, 38 sacks, and 30 hurries, as well as 2 interceptions and 11 pass deflections. This Valor defense got a lot of turnovers, and you could almost credit, I'd probably say 70% of those at the very least. 70% of Valor's turnovers to Margot Harry. Just getting to the quarterback and maybe not quite getting there, but getting a big time pressure to force that, a hurry to force that. She did have 30 on the seasons, or she got a big sack to go ahead and force 3rd and 4th and long situations, which inevitably ends up with interceptions. So shout out Margot Harry out of Valor Christian, their star rusher. But only one of them can win Defensive Playmaker of the Year. And so let's go ahead and get to the votes here, starting with my vote. I will be going with Jasmine Lugo out of Regis Jesuit. And this is maybe just my personal opinion, but I have historically usually always voted for the best rusher when it comes to, or not just Colorado girls high school flag football, but just women's flag football as well on the college level. And I just think the value of a rusher cannot be denied. They put in a lot of work. You know, it's really hard to do that stuff. Corner is obviously tough as well, but at rusher, I mean, you got to look out for a lot of things. And it's my opinion that stopping a tough offense starts with an elite rusher. And so I got to go with Jasmine Lugo out of Regis Jesuit. I think she was the best rusher this year. So there you go there. Now, our Twitter vote, there were 240 votes, so the fan favorite, the winner of the fan vote here, I should say, is Chaparral's Molly McWilliams with 53% of the votes. Margot Harry right behind her with 23%, Ashlyn Callahan with 18%, and Jasmine Lugo with 6%. So there you go, split at 1-1. But let me go ahead and read Gino's vote here. He is going to go with Jasmine Lugo. He said, I'm picking Lugo for the same reasons I chose her as rusher of the year. Regis definitely had their fair share of struggles this season, but the Raiders stayed afloat with Lugo being the leader of their defense. So there you go there. Your Defensive Playmaker of the Year here in 2024 on the 5A level in Colorado girls high school flag football is the freshman out of Regis Jesuit, Jasmine Lugo. All right, now let's go ahead and go to Offensive Playmaker of the Year. We have talked about all the finalists that I'm about to mention here, but I'll make sure to mention some of their accomplishments one last time. But let's go ahead and start with the youngest one, the freshman Zoe Fink, the quarterback phenom out of Chaparral and your Newcomer of the Year. She had a great season, throwing for 3,072 yards, 50 touchdowns to only 15 picks, while having 461 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. She led one of the most consistent offenses in the entire state, and there was a reason why they went on that big time winning streak to start the season. Speaking of quarterbacks, we have 2 more we got to talk about, both of them juniors, starting with the junior out of Cherry Creek, Addie Beck here. On the season, threw for 3,781 yards, 60 touchdowns to only 9 picks, while having 459 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. Not playing in the month of August, but still having a great season here for Cherry Creek, putting up some great yards and numbers all the way throughout the season. I believe there was only one game where she did not throw for at least 4 touchdowns, and currently that's listed as the legend game, but I'm pretty sure she threw touchdowns in that one, so that might just be a statistical mistake. But other than that, there's like 16 other games where she's thrown for at least 4 touchdowns, and that is absolutely big time. Now, moving on, let's go to Valor Christian's Faith Prinzo. She would end up throwing for 3,622 yards, 47 touchdowns, 13 picks, while having 895 yards and 9 rushing touchdowns. Out of all the players on this list, I believe she's the only one that got close to throwing for over 3,000 yards and rushing for nearly 1,000 yards, as she did it both through the air and on the ground for Valor Christian, where they only lost lost. I mean, the only team they lost to, this team has lost to, was Arvada West. Other than that, they beat every single opponent that they faced. So there you go there. That is Valor Christian. And then last but not least, we have the senior out of Arvada West, the dominant wide receiver, Sarah Walker here on the year. 142 receptions, 1,632 receiving yards, and 31 receiving touchdowns. Surely, well, I mean, it is because it's the inaugural season, but those 31 receiving touchdowns is the most in the entire state. So currently, that is number one all time she is number one all time in receiving touchdowns caught in a season. So there you go there. That's Sarah Walker out of Arvada West, but there can only be one. Let's go ahead and get to the votes here, starting with mine. I'm going with Addie Beck out of Cherry Creek. I mean, she played excellent football once she came back. Like I said, did not play in August, but would come out in September and play some great football. Throwing for 4 touchdowns in pretty much every game at least is phenomenal. And at least 16 of the 17 games listed, which like I said, I think it might be 17 out of 17 games. But for her to do that is big time, and that's why Cherry Creek was so dangerous in these playoffs and was a team that easily could have went to state, in my opinion, if things just a couple things went the other way. So there you go. I have to go with Addie Beck out of Cherry Creek. Now, Gino's going to go another direction. He is voting for Sarah Walker. He says there's no receiver in the state that can do what Sarah Walker can do. She's surprisingly very agile despite being 6 feet tall, and her jump ball ability is unmatched. The simple fact of the matter is that no one can guard Sarah Walker, and that's why she's my pick for Offensive Playmaker of the Year. So there you go there. Split at 1-1, but you gotta remember the fan vote is the tiebreaker here. So whenever there's ties, that'll decide it, even if it's 1-1, and that is the case here. With 454 total votes, this player got 51% of those, and that is the junior out of Valor Christian, their quarterback Faith Prinzo, who got those 51% of the votes there, as she will win Offensive Playmaker of the Year. Right behind her was Zoe Fink with 20%, Addie Beck with 17%, and Sarah Walker with 12% there. But like I said, the fan vote, that's the tiebreaker, and I think she's very deserving of it. I mean, throwing for over 3,000 yards, nearly 1,000 yards rushing at 900 right there, just about. That's big time. She's a great player for them, and she has one more year coming back next season for her senior year, so that'll be super exciting. But there you go there, your 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football 5A Offensive Playmaker of the Year is Valor Christian's junior quarterback Faith Prinzo. Now, before we get to MVP, which is our final player award category, we have Coach of the Year, and we have 4 great coaches here who are very deserving of this honor, and there are finalists and some of the best in the entire state. Let's just go ahead and go down the line, starting with the first-year head coach, Lacey Abell of Arvada West. And excuse me if I'm saying that wrong, but I believe that's how you say it. In her first year, 16-3, they were able to go to state, where unfortunately they fell short to Mountain Vista, but still played them close. You got to remember, this Mountain Vista team was the same team that won over them 25-13 very early on in the season. This Arvada West team was in a position to win it. They were leading at some point in the fourth, but just came up a little bit short. Their only other loss, though, was to Cherry Creek. But other than that, this was a team that did their best to defend their state title, coached by head coach Lacey Abell over there, and we felt like she did a very good job in her first year, with key wins, by the way, over Legend 35-0 at the start of the season, 27-12 over Valor, 30-14 over Ralston, 41-0 against Chatfield, 39-6 against Columbine, 39-6 against Valor Christian again, and then 46-12 against Valor in the playoffs. I think that is definitely worth noting there, as this Arvada West team was on fire on the offensive and defensive side of the ball for most of the season, and were able to make a state championship appearance. So there you go there, Lacey Abell of Arvada West. Now, the next head coach that we have nominated as a finalist is Cherry Creek's head coach, David Nokel. or Knokel, I think is maybe how you say that. Excuse us if we're saying that wrong, or if I'm saying that wrong. But Cherry Creek went 15-2, only lost 2 games. One was at the beginning of the season to Mountain Vista, who would be the eventual state champs, only 20-7. And then at the very end was to Legend in a heartbreaker, 40-35, but definitely still in that game. In between, Cherry Creek was a force to be reckoned with, winning the Centennial League with a 7-0 record. They also had pretty big wins over Chatfield, 33-16, Ralston Valley 19-8, Pomona 32-13. They would also beat Arvada West, by the way, 27-18, which would be huge. In the playoffs, they would beat Chatfield 32-28 before, like I said, losing to a tough Legend team, only 40-35. So shout out Cherry Creek's head coach over there. He's done a great job with this group here, who does have some experience, but I think it's also worth noting that they were without Addie Beck for, I think, 3 games, the first 3 games of the season against Mountain Vista, Chatfield, and Ralston Valley, and then Beck came back against Pomona. So for them to go 2-1 in those games, and I mean, one of those was to a team that ended up being undefeated, that's absolutely big time, and it's a great accomplishment for that Cherry Creek program and the head coach David Knokel over there. Moving on to our next finalists here, we have Lance Petrillo of Chaparral here. This team, in their second year, had a very good season, going 14-3. Their only losses was to Mountain Vista 31-20, a close one to Legend 14-13, and then unfortunately in the playoffs they fell short to Valor by 1 score, 20-12. But this was a team with one of the hottest starts to the season. They went 12-0. They would only lose to Mountain Vista there at the end. And even then, they were up 2 scores against them. Unfortunately, that one just kind of slipped away at the end. But that's to a very good Mountain Vista team. On that 12-0 run, they played playoff teams like Grandview 18-0, Arapahoe 32-0, Regis Jesuit 26-14, Heritage 26-7, Thunder Ridge 13-0, in that one. And then you have some 4A playoff teams as well in Ponderosa 32-0, Highlands Ranch 33-6. They beat Chatfield 25-21 before eventually falling to Mountain Vista. But then they would also bounce back with a win over playoff team Douglas County 27-18. This Chaparral team did a very good job, and head coach Lance Petrillo deserves a lot of credit, as well as the squad. But, to guide this team with a freshman quarterback and a lot of young pieces through this schedule and win 12 in a row to start, that is absolutely huge for this program. That is definitely going into one of the, potential contenders moving forward in powerhouses. So we'll just have to see what happens from there. But last but not least here, and I already know I might be saying this wrong here, but our last finalist is the Mountain Vista head coach, Dana Sardock. On the year, 19-0, the only undefeated team so far in Colorado Girls High School flag football history, as this is year 1, but they were the last team standing at 19-0, undefeated here, beating the likes of Arvada West 25-13 to start the season, and then at the very end, obviously, to win their first state championship 32-21. That's obviously huge there. They would also beat teams like Cherry Creek 20-7, Legend 31-26. That one was a thriller, by the way. Regis Jesuit 35-7, Heritage 37-6, Chaparral 31-20. That was a comeback win right there. Thunder Ridge, a good team right there, 45-7. Ralston Valley 48-21. Regis Jesuit 56-7 the second time. And then in the playoffs, you had Thunder Ridge the second time there, 55-20. Legend 37-19. And this is probably worth saying as well. In that Legend game, they were down, and then they would come back and explode for a huge second half on offense. This team was on fire, and it seemed like they were destined to win state, and it's for good reason as well, because whenever they were down, they found a way to come back and win and grind it out if they needed to, as shown against Chaparral and legend, and Arvada West, to be honest with you, as well. So shout out head coach Dana Sardock of Mountain Vista there. But let's go ahead and get to the votes here, starting with the Twitter vote with 196 votes. The winner of the fan vote goes to Chaparral's head coach Lance Petrillo with 40.3% of the votes. Just behind him was David Nokel of Cherry Creek, 24.5%, Lacey Abell with 21.9%, and Dana Sardock with 13.3%. But Gino is going to go ahead and split this vote and cast his vote for Dana Sardock of Mountain Vista. He said, not a single loss despite playing the best the state has to offer all season long. I can't think of giving this award to anyone else besides Sardock, the way he helped lead this Mountain Vista squad to a state championship. And, you know, I am also going to go ahead and cast my vote for Mountain Vista's head coach there. I thought he did an excellent job. Like I said, we witnessed this team face some adversity. I got to see their, I want to say, closest game of the regular season against Chaparral, where they were down in that first half and then they stormed back. That showed me a lot, I'm not going to lie. And actually, I lied. That was not their closest game. It was the legend game in the regular season that was super close, where they ended up winning on a Hail Mary. But watching that fourth quarter and watching this team bounce back and operate through the highs and lows, you know, that says a lot to the head coach and the coaching staff over there at Mountain Vista and their ability to get this team right back on track. So that was big time. And then playing Legend that second time, I mean, Legend, they got themselves a nice lead. They pushed them in the semis, but Mountain Vista would prevail. And then last but not least, I mean, in case it wasn't clear, but that win over Arvada West was pretty sweet as well. They had to find a way to get it done, made some adjustments, put Ariana Akey on defense, where she made a huge impact there, her best defensive performance like in her career and all season, and that was huge, you know, and that provided them their first state championship. So I think it's fitting to say your 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football 5A Coach of the Year is Mountain Vista's head coach Dana Sardock. All right, now let's get to the big one, most valuable Playmaker, the MVP award. No need to explain what that is. Let's go ahead and get into our finalists, starting with the junior out of Mountain Vista, the state champion and quarterback for them, Ariana Akey, on the year. 4,435 passing yards, 82 passing touchdowns to 9 picks, as well as 1,243 rushing yards and 13 rushing touchdowns. The only quarterback in Colorado to have over 4,000 passing yards and over 1,000 rushing yards in a season, combining for 95, technically 96 touchdowns, as she had one receiving touchdown this season, but 96 total touchdowns on the year on offense. And then defensively, it's also worth saying, you know, she got a couple opportunities to play, and she got 29 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, but I will say what solidified her position as a finalist here was her state championship performance, where on offense she did her thing. 331 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 1 interception, while running for 81 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. And then defensively, 5 tackles, 1 sack, 2 interceptions, both in the fourth quarter. That was honestly big time and electric for this young player. Moving on, we have Sophia O'Donnell, the junior out of Chaparral. This offense rotated around her, revolved around her, as she was big time on the ground. 1,642 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns, as well as 457 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns on 34 receptions. She was the backbone of this offense here, and in 5A, where it's tough to run the ball against very good teams, she was able to do it, just slowly chipping away at some of these squads here, and that's definitely impressive there and worthy of an MVP consideration, as she is a finalist, obviously there. Now, moving to the seniors, we have 2 good ones, great ones here. In the senior from Cherry Creek, Molly Durigi, on offense, 169 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, 98 receptions, 960 receiving yards, and 19 receiving touchdowns. On defense, 54 tackles, 15 interceptions and 7 pass deflections. She is Cherry Creek's Travis Hunter, one of the best, arguably the best two-way player in the entire state here, as she led Cherry Creek to a dominant record in the regular season and a solid playoff run as well. And then last but not least, we have the state champion from last year, the quarterback for Arvada West. It's the senior Sailor Swanson. On the season, 4,953 passing yards. I believe she's the lead passer in the state there as far as yards go. 81 passing touchdowns, only 12 picks, while also having 958 rushing yards and 12 rushing touchdowns. There are only 2 quarterbacks in this state that threw for over 4,000 yards and got close to rushing 4,000, even rushed for 900 yards. And that is, one of them is Sailor Swanson. So there you go there. She did great. And then on defense, 18 tackles and an interception against Mountain Vista in the state championship. She got a big time interception to keep this thing close. And then obviously almost led them back into another state championship win. Did give them the lead there, but unfortunately just came up a little bit short. Now, let's go ahead and get to the voting here, starting with Gino here. He is going to go ahead and cast his vote for Ariana Akey. He says this one's a no-brainer. Akey elevates his Mountain Vista offense in a way that makes them practically unbeatable. Akey has multiple key moments this season, from beating Arvada West in week 1 to her Hail Mary to beat Legend. Players like Ariana Akey don't come around often, and she's definitely the most valuable playmaker for this season. So there you go there, a vote casted for Ariana Akey. Now, let's go to the Twitter vote here with 306 total votes. This one was relatively close, but the winner won with 37% of the votes, and that would be Cherry Creek's Molly Durigi, followed by Sophia O'Donnell at 31% from Chaparral, Sailor Swanson with 18%, Ariana Akey with 14%. Durigi, obviously the best two-way player in the state of Colorado. That makes a lot of sense to me. So there you go there. That's one vote for Ariana Akey, one vote for Molly Durigi, and it's going to come down to my vote, as I considered mostly 3 players throughout this season for MVP. Actually 4, I think. I considered all of them. Sophia O'Donnell with that fast start. They won 12-0. She was definitely at the center of all that. And watching them live against Heritage, that was very obvious. And, I really wouldn't have any... even right now, I wouldn't have any problem voting for her. But there are 3 other finalists for a reason. So, there you go. Then you have Molly Durigi. I got to see her live as well. I legitimately think she's the best two-way player in the entire state. Played great football for Cherry Creek throughout the season. And, she was consistently playing both sides of the ball, and that's tiring. And for her to do that at such a high level and dominating on both sides, she is the definition of an iron woman and toughness in this state. So, gotta give her a lot of props there. I definitely would have also voted for her if it was any other season as well. And then we got our final 2 here, the 2 quarterbacks, Ariana Akey and Sailor Swanson. If you asked me at the beginning of the year who my vote, or who I thought was the favorite for MVP at the end of the season, it'd be Sailor Swanson. I love her game. I think she has worked so hard to go ahead and refine her craft throughout these last 3 years. Watching her grow as a player and become not just a good player, but a dangerous player that I legitimately think can go to the college level and make a lot of noise, and hoping that if she does choose to do that, she does, because we would love to cover her. And more for selfish reasons than anything, right? Getting a Colorado athlete out there. But my vote would have been for Sailor Swanson because of how well she played last year. And then even this season, they suffered that first loss to Mountain Vista. They bounced back and fought their way back to go ahead and get back to state. They did lose to Cherry Creek, but even then they would bounce back after that and they would go on their winning streak to get to state. And at state, she brought them back. she played some good football along with Sarah Walker over there and gave them the lead in the fourth quarter, but unfortunately would come up just a little bit short. And so that will go ahead and bring me to my next point here with this last finalist and my vote for most valuable playmaker, and it's Ariana Akey, the junior out of Mountain Vista. Not only did she impress playing quarterback this season with just her raw athletic abilities and being an amazing dual threat, she also played a little bit of defense when they needed her, and in this championship game against a very tough Arvada West team, they needed her, and she delivered. Defensively, she got that sack, I believe, in the fourth quarter, and even if she didn't, she got 2 interceptions in the fourth to pretty much put that one away, and that was the difference for me. But even then, I mean, this team that she led, they went undefeated. The first team ever in Colorado girls high school flag football history to go undefeated, and they did it in year 1. I believe this is her first year playing flag football, and she's just been so impressive. This team has not had a cupcake schedule at all. They've played the best of the best that this state got to offer, and she found a way to get it done. And there were some close calls, not gonna lie. Against Legend, she threw the Hail Mary pass to win that one. Against Chaparral, they're down 2 scores. They would go on a crazy run where she scored like 4 touchdowns in the second half to go ahead and win that one in the regular season. Against Legend again in the semis, she would go ahead and make the play she needed to get them to state. Even after she hurt her knee in the fourth quarter, she would come back in with a knee brace and find a way to go get it done and throw the dagger to end that game. And then against Arvada West, they went up big, right, to start. Went up 2 scores. And then Sailor Swanson and Sarah Walker and that Arvada West team that is so dangerous. They're the defending state champs. They're looking to knock them off specifically. They storm back and retake the lead in the fourth. The crowd's going crazy. And Ariana Akey does not back down, and she leads this Mountain Vista squad to victory. Obviously, it wasn't just her over there, but she was the catalyst for a lot of that. So there you go there. Your 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football 5A Most Valuable Playmaker goes to the junior out of Mountain Vista, Ariana Akey. All right, now we're going to go ahead and talk about our all-PMC and all-freshman teams pretty briefly here. In case you don't know how it goes down, me and the guys on the podcast, really just me and Gino, decide who makes these teams. Unlike All-State, we do have positional limits, so that means we have to make some tough decisions here. So let me go ahead and read off what those limits are. We only take 2 quarterbacks, 3 receivers, 2 utility players on offense, 2 rushers, 3 linebackers, 4 defensive backs, that could be safeties, corners, whatever, and then 1 athlete. Usually this athlete plays both ways and is great and frees up a spot. For the most part, with these teams and lists here, we try to limit it to 1 person per side of the ball here, so you're never gonna see someone like a player be listed at both wide receiver and DB. We're looking to promote the best athletes in Colorado, and if we can do that, then we will. And so that goes for the all-freshman team as well. Same limits there. And like I said, it's not like Chas's all-state team where, especially for boys, they have a lot of different players making it. There's no, set or noticeable limits at all to who gets to make it, and there's no first or second or third team or honorable mentions. It is what we got. This is the best of the best that we have in the state, in our honest opinion. So with that being said, all I'm going to do for this one is just list out the names here. We'll have graphics posted hopefully everywhere as well with this episode on TikTok, Twitter/X, Instagram, hopefully Facebook as well. So you can be able to see all of this stuff there as well. So there you go. But let's just go ahead and hop into it. Let's start with the all-freshman team here. Obviously, this team is made up of only freshmen who contributed on varsity. And so here's what we got. This is the future of Colorado football, some of the future of Colorado football. Your 5A all-freshman team here in 2024. At quarterback, we have Zoe Fink from Chaparral and Whitney Folger from Arapahoe. At wide receiver, we have Ava Keene from Regis Jesuit, Caitlin Bueller from Regis Jesuit, and Caroline Cummings from Northfield. At athlete, we have this player who's great on both ways here. Big time contributor for her team, and that's Caroline Bain out of Lakewood. At rusher, or sorry, I just realized we didn't get to utility player. Sorry. At utility player, we have Shelby Colosimo from Ralston Valley and Joy Jameson out of Overland. Now at rusher, we got Jasmine Lugo out of Regis Jesuit and Sarai Wilson out of Overland. At linebacker, we have Harper Tillman from Arvada West, Keely Graff from Regis Jesuit, and Carol Martinez Tesserino from North Glen. And then at defensive back, we have Maylin Flood from Denver South, Leah Hymas from North Glen, Izzy Usagani from Arapaho, and Emerson Drake from Arvada West. So there you go there. That is your 5A all-freshman team. Now moving to the 5A all-PMC team, this is how it goes. At quarterback, we have the junior from Mountain Vista, Ariana Akey. We have the senior, Sailor Swanson from Arvada West. At wide receiver, we have Sarah Walker, the senior out of Arvada West, Molly Shellpepper, the senior out of Arvada West, and Carmen Johnson, the senior out of Ralston Valley. At utility, we have Sophia O'Donnell, the junior out of Chaparral, and Braylon Looney, the junior out of Mountain Vista. At athlete, great player both ways here at wide receiver and defensive back. We have the senior from Cherry Creek, Molly Durigi. At rusher, we have the freshman from Regis Jesuit, Jasmine Lugo, and then the senior from Valor Christian, Margot Harry. At linebacker, we have the senior from Chat, Melanie, aka Ducky Archuleta. We have the senior from Chaparral, Sophie Matthews, and then the junior from Valor Christian, Reese Beezer. At defensive back, we have the senior from Doherty, Alyssa Ramos, the junior from Ralston Valley, and Ashlyn Callahan, the sophomore from Grandview in Brooke Sullivan, and then the sophomore from Denver South in Helen Campisi. So there you go there. That is your 5A all-PMC team, the best of the best that this state has to offer, some of the best that this state has to offer. Make sure you check out the 4A all-PMC team and all-freshman team as well. Alrighty, now that'll do it for this episode of the Playmakers Corner, and this will also be the very last episode of the 2024 Colorado Girls High School Flag Football season. Once again, shout out to all the great supporters out there that we have. We really appreciate all the kind words y'all have given us all season, but especially a big shout out to the state of Colorado and all the great programs, coaches, players, supporters throughout the season that made this one so special. Obviously, it was the inaugural season, but there were two other seasons ran by the Broncos before this, which we have covered, just not as much, but just a little bit as well. Definitely covered all of the playoffs the last 2 years, so that's big time. But this being the inaugural year, we really wanted to focus on girls flag football and do a good job here, and I feel very satisfied with some of the work we're able to do, but still looking to get better here and hoping to get to cover it to a bigger extent here in the future. And, you know, as of right now, it is November 7th when I am recording this intro. A lot of stuff has happened, including a whole snowstorm, the election, all that great stuff. But one thing I can guarantee you here at the Playmakers Corner is that we are going to push Colorado athletes, get them opportunities to play at the next level. Not just because, you know, they get to play on the next level and it's cool, but, you know, get into higher level education. That's extremely important in our eyes here. Which, for those of you who know me, I work in education. That's my day job. And, you know, that's something that's never going to go away. I think everyone has the right to a higher level education, and I think getting these athletes potential opportunities and looks on the next level is huge for that. And I'm not going to make too many political statements, but a higher level education benefits everyone. So there you go there, you know, but shout out all these great athletes. For some of the seniors here, looking forward to covering them in college here in a year or so, just over a year or so, as the college season is in the spring. And, you know, we're going to hopefully get a lot of interviews with some of these great players throughout this off season. So make sure you tune in for those. I know Cody and Gideon will be able to man a lot of those interviews. We want to make sure we get a lot more stories out there and inspiration for the next generation of football players in Colorado. So there you go there. this isn't goodbye. You'll still hear me on the boys episode if you listen to that, but if not, I'd encourage y'all to listen to our women's college flag football episodes in the spring. I'm hoping to start season previews a little bit more detailed, that is, than in the past here. Hopefully that'll start dropping late January, February for sure. So make sure you check in there, and then, we'll cover the whole season and playoffs like we have the last 2 or 3 years. So, yeah, hopefully you'll get to listen to me there. But once more, from everyone here on the podcast, thank you so much. If there's anything we can do for y'all, we're just a DM away. And until next time, we'll catch you later.